morning was as beautiful as the Saturday before it, but in all other respects the 2 days seemed to be a million miles apart. Now he sat looking at 15-foot fences topped with razor wire, while a prison officer examined his ID card in the cubicle, and another stood outside it looking at him. The last time he was here he had driven through with just a nod to an old boy who probably had the Sun crossword half completed in front of him. Further down the line of vehicles parked on the left, he could see 2 marked police cars, with one of the uniformed officers positioned outside the building. No doubt he would have to show his ID again if he ever got that far. Alison Reeve had told him everything that she knew. When he looked at the number, he had half laughed and said that there must be some mistake because that was not his. Then he realized and saw her nodding because she had been there before him. It was not his number now, but it was the number of the phone that he had been using last year before O'Leary reprogrammed it on behalf of Her Majesty's Secret Service, or rather, before he gave it to someone who was actually capable of doing such a thing. Then he had said to her that surely the phone companies recycle numbers that are no longer used. Was it all some bizarre coincidence? No, that had all been thoroughly checked by Huntingdonshire's finest. The number had not been reallocated, and the last person to own it, in fact the only person ever to own it, was one David Conrad Smith. Imagine their delight, she had said, when they looked him up and found out what he did for a living. And imagine, too, she had said, Superintendent Allen's face when they told him, because that was the level it had been passed on at, superintendent to superintendent, before it found its way back down to detective inspector, and then to detective sergeant. Smith had said, they called him on a Saturday morning? Quite early, I believe. And then he had to come into the office? It being a potentially serious matter, yes, he did. Dear me. His sad shake of the head could hardly convey how badly he felt about all that. No, he had never heard of Lionel Everett, and it was not a name that one was likely to forget. He had suggested looking him up on the National Records database. He was definitely going to be there unless there had been a truly awful miscarriage of justice, and Reeve had refused. She had been warned off doing anything that might compromise Huntingdon's investigation into how a detective sergeant's mobile number came to be in the possession of a murdered prisoner, and that would certainly include allowing the said detective sergeant to gain access to the dead man's records. She had said to him, "DC, don't log on at all until this has been sorted out, just to be on the safe side." And it was then that he realized that she, at least, was taking this seriously. The uniformed man did check his ID again, and then asked him to wait inside the door. The officer had been told to call someone when Smith arrived. The staff entrance and reception area had all been redesigned since his last visit, but to be fair, that was a few years ago now. He thought about Charlie Hills, still bravely clinging on to his wooden counter as if it was a piece of flotsam in a storm at sea, hoping against hope that they had forgotten about Kings Lake Central Reception, but there was little chance of that. The entrances to everything are being redesigned as often as the mission statements up on the walls are being rewritten. The detective approaching him, there is no mistaking us once you know what to look for, he thought, must be of a similar vintage to himself, or not far off it. He might be the DI too, but that was not so certain, and by the time the two of them had shaken hands, Smith knew that he was not. "Hello, DC Hinton, Nigel." "Smith, Detective Sergeant." "From Kings Lake, yes? Sorry, have to check." Smith showed his ID for the 3rd time. Hinton said, "Right, I'll take you down to D.I. Terek. He's the SIO on it, until we hear anything different." They set off along the corridor. Something in Hinton's last words had caught Smith's attention. It would be wrong to quiz a detective constable in this situation, but they didn't have to walk in complete silence, did they? "Is he new to it, the SIO bit?" "New to most bits, as far as I know. He's not my regular DI." "I see. You just got an unlucky one."